Okay, I said I would do some version of this and I hadn't been certain of format, and I'm still not certain of format, but this will be a way that I can convey this information, which is a training update, to you, the interested person. As a refresher, the goal is a 300 kilo deadlift and a sub 3 hour marathon, either on the same weekend or on the same day, with a format to be determined. For reference, my best ever deadlift is 320 kilograms, which I've done 3 times. That was at a heavier body weight. My best ever marathon is 3 hours and 14 minutes. That was at a lower body weight. So what I'm trying to do is run a faster marathon that I ever have before with a deadlift that's within range of my best ever. I'm not sure if anyone's done both of these in the same lifetime, let alone the same weekend or day. That's the part that's interesting for me. I think I can do it based on my prior best, but there's only one way to find out. Down here I'll be speaking to phases. Phase 1, phase 2. A phase for me currently is 4 weeks loading, 4 weeks training, and then 1 week deload. And I have to make this relatively clear for at least myself, because if not for this, then I tend to push out the loading phase and either skip or de-emphasize the deload. But I found that given that the sustainability of process is necessary for any sort of significant progress, that sustainability itself becomes a priority. And with that in mind, even though I could perhaps accomplish more than 4 weeks of loading before a deload, it tends to be when I push it to 4, 5, 6, or 8, then I'm more likely to break down or accumulate niggles, injuries, that sort of thing, which cuts at the sustainability part. So it works better for me. And in general, the harder you go, the bigger you are, the more often that you need to deload. So for me, 4 weeks training, and that tends to be 4 weeks progressing each week, and then a 1 week deload. For me, the deload is a pretty significant deload. There are many ways to do it. For me, I deloaded last week, so to be specific, I'm between phase 1 and phase 2 currently. Phase 2 starts today, which is why it's timely to do this now. Deload was last week, and it was mostly yoga, stretching, soft tissue work. I had 2 days, which were very short, moderate cardio. So basically some jump rope for 10 minutes and then 30 minutes on the bike erg, which is a stationary bike for those that aren't aware, to maintain my aerobic qualities, with the main purpose of the deload week to mean that I'm physically and mentally frothing at the mouth to get back into training for this next phase. So 4 weeks, 1 week, loading, unloading. To go back in time to see how things went for phase 1 and what the intention was, and also to prepare to indicate what the goal is for phase 2. That's what we're doing today. So phase 1 just complete, 5 weeks, including the 1 week deload, which was last week. I'm going to break this down into both the deload and then the run aspect, the deadlift, and then the run aspect, and then other, which is just other stuff that doesn't neatly fall into each category. So the deadlift, the intention for phase 1 was just to basically keep it general. What I've noticed with the deadlift is that if I aim for it too soon and too aggressively, that I can get it pretty strong pretty quickly, and then it sort of peaks and starts going downhill. Now, given how far away I am from this part of things, the sub 3 hour marathon, which I'll get to, I don't need to peak my deadlift anytime soon. I just need to start laying down the foundation to be able to peak it later. For this phase, it was, in terms of specific preparation, it was as non-specific as it's going to be for this entire training process. the closest I got to movements that would directly feed the deadlift is relatively heavy bent over rows and then some kettlebell swings. This phase that'll progress to Romanian deadlifts, which is a version of the movement, but still not picking the bar off the floor, which will be the inevitable and eventual goal and will require specific training. At this stage, relatively general. Working on strong, being strong more broadly, not just in that movement, is also working on structural differences left to right, basically building a foundation so that I can be at my strongest later, not necessarily today or last week or the week before. As for the run, for reference for running, prior to this phase, which was starting 5 weeks ago, I'm gone for a run in about a decade. So at this stage, with these ambitions, the goal was to just start and to see where I was at, because any plans that would need to occur between the start and the finish need to be based in reality, and without actually starting and seeing where I was at, there's not a real clear sight on what reality is. So a big part of phase one was to get started and to connect with where my running capacity actually is/was. And I knew it wouldn't be great. Running has only ever felt good when I was in the habit of running. I've never not run for a period of time, gone for a run and felt, oh, this is good. It's usually hard work until I get both in running shape and in the habit of mechanically moving my body in that way for a sufficient period of time, which I just haven't done for a long time. With that in mind, keeping the runs short was going to be primary. Running on grass and barefoot was also a key element of this. The reason for grass is that it's going to absorb some of the impact. With a bigger body, without any recent running practice, the idea of running on really hard surfaces immediately seemed like not such a great idea to me, because of the possible consequences in terms of loading knees, shins, feet, that sort of thing. The other side of that is a need and an interest in developing foot strength for the work that is going to come, and not just foot, but foot, ankle, and lower limb. So I'm both trying to create a strength stimulus whilst also managing impact, which meant that if I was doing nothing but short walks, short runs on grass, barefoot, that I was getting the sweet spot of stimulation without annihilation. The way that I was going to bolster the aerobic volume, which is to say that given that the runs are short and I need to still build aerobic capacity, I'm using the bike erg, just a stationary bike. For those that aren't aware, could use a road bike, but it's more controllable to use a stationary bike because there's no traffic lights, there's no gradient, so it's all very controlled and measurable. And that's the major tool that I'm using to build aerobic volume without just building running volume. This may not be the exact approach that someone else would take, but again, when you have a bigger frame without a lot of recent running, there's two things I need to do. I need to build running capacity, but I also need to build aerobic capacity, and my aerobic ability at the moment supersedes where I'm at running wise. So instead of trying to play a game where I just run and underpin the aerobic volume side of things, I am able to accumulate some volume with the running, but the majority of it in phase one and in phase two will be on the bike erg. The running itself for phase one went pretty well. It started kind of as I expected, which it felt super inefficient, but got better over time. I think my longest continuous run was 6.6 Ks at 6 minutes, 10 kilometers. So both shorter than the runs will need to be, much shorter, and slower. But slower isn't so bad at this stage. In fact, it's exactly as it needs to be. My body wants to run faster than I am efficiently able to do. So I spent a lot of time both slowing myself down so that I could be in the heart rate zone that I wanted to be, for things to both be stimulating the right metabolic pathways, but also to not be running faster than I'm capable of just yet. The challenge with the barefoot is I noticed my feet would get sore, and I'm also was dodging, small potholes and dog shit, and that's not such a bad thing because I had to be agile enough to pay attention to where I was stepping. The running here as well contained quite a bit of run walking, which was the plan at the outset. If I was to base my eventual abilities on this phase, I wouldn't expect too much from myself, in that it was all very unimpressive and moderate, but I know that that's where it was going to always be at the start, and that's not where it's going to be at the finish. Other considerations for this phase, or things to know, were that, to start with the hip, a big emphasis was to see what I could do and to start building a foundation without accumulating any niggles/injuries. I got that 95% right, but my hip for the last couple of runs, my right hip, was just starting to feel pretty grabby, specifically in the run stride. The positive thing is that it wasn't showing up anywhere else. I can't feel it when I walk, I can't feel it when I jump or do stuff like kettlebell swings or moving about the place, but I did notice it when running every step. So every time I planted my right foot, I could feel a pinch in my right hip. With the deload, I took the time to not run at all, because every time I even broke into a small jog to test it at the start of the week, I could feel it. Even though it was getting slightly better each day, I figured it would make more sense just to leave it alone, to work on unloading it, as well as a lot of soft tissue work and stretching. And then with this next phase, to start again and to hopefully have the hip be in a better place. And I'm not really going to know until I get there. The other thing to know is that my body weight during this phase has gone up, which in of itself isn't an issue, other than at my current body weight, which is about 105 kilos, I think that I'm a little too heavy to best accomplish my sub 3-hour marathon aspirations. And not just for the marathon itself, but the training to get there, to be a little bit heavier than necessary throughout the entire preparation, also would correspond with just a little increase in load throughout. And at this weight, it feels just a little too heavy to be as efficient as I want to be. And the wear on all of the structures of the body for the mileage that I intend to do may just be a little bit too high. For this phase, the reason that the body weight went up as opposed to maintaining or going down, it's just a matter of calories in, calories out. But specifically prior to this phase, knowing that I didn't want to start this phase even heavier, I'd been dieting pretty consistently, basically since the start of the pandemic. To take it all the way back to March 2020 was probably the strongest I've ever been, and was also the heaviest I've ever been, at about 124 kilos. So over the last 4 years, I've basically dropped about 20 kilos, started this phase at about 102, 103, and felt like, given the consistency and duration of that calorie deficit, I wanted to have a period of time where I provided my body with at least sufficient nourishment, and wanted to see if I just ate to being satiated, how that would affect my body weight as I laid in more training volume and got started with running. And the end result was that I gained a couple of kilos, went from 102, 103 to a pretty consistent 105, which is about what I am today. Which, to take it all the way down here, would have one of the aspirations for phase 2 is to get the body weight down and to do it pretty aggressively so that it doesn't have to be a focus of mine for phases 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and all the way to 10. I'd rather do it in spurts and then be able to fully fuel the training phases that come after and prior to the next phase that has an emphasis on lowering my body weight. So to make running easier, now and in the future, I will have that focus for this phase to drop my body weight from about 105 to 101, 102, and then I will have another phase in a few months from now, to be determined, where I'll get closer to that 100 kilos to 98, which is, I'd imagine, where I'll end up somewhere between 100 and 96 kilos. The way to achieve that, and the way to always achieve that, is with a calorie deficit. How one achieves that calorie deficit, there's many ways to skin that cat. For me, I will end up having pretty aggressive calorie deficits on my recovery days so that my input matches my output. I could provide nourishment on training days, and that if I have to have a deficit somewhere, instead of having a little bit every day, I'd rather it be aggressive certain days, which for me is going to be on Wednesday, and on Sundays I will likely just fast the entire day so I can have a significant deficit on that day, rather than just skimming a little bit and never feeling fully content every day. Deadlift aspirations for phase 2. Instead of ignoring the deadlift movement entirely, I'm going to start with some Romanian deadlifts, which is the first time in a while that I've done some, or will have done some moderately heavy hinging, and we'll be heading in the direction of some serious deadlifts down the line, but not quite yet. The other thing to know for the deadlift is I'm changing the structure of the training week from the 2 resistance training sessions, being a push and a pull, to 2 sessions, one that has a power focus, one that has a strength focus. In both of those, I will have movements that aim to bolster the deadlift. For the strength will be the RDLs. For the power day, which is today, Monday, I will have kettlebell swings, which are a little bit more dynamic, but more or less the same movement, as well as some box jumps and some explosive squats and a few other things I'm not fully going to elaborate on here, because I just want to speak to the overall structure rather than the minutiae of any particular session. That could be another video, and a much longer one if I today started getting stuck into all of that. For running, I'm going to add shoes. Woo! Adding shoes. After doing barefoot only for the last 5 weeks, so looking forward to that, because I'll probably be able to run a little faster for the same effort, which is going to be just innately more enjoyable. I'm curious as to how that's going to feel on my hip, but I'm not going to know until I get there. Questions will be along the lines of, what shoes am I using, given that I worked for a major footwear manufacturer for a few years, and Adidas Adidas. I'll probably end up using some super shoes with the carbon plate and the rocker, but to begin with, I'm using just a zero drop, wide toe box, pretty minimal running shoe. That tends to be what I've done most of my running in, basically the least amount of shoe possible. Perhaps more cushion would be helpful given everything, but I've never really enjoyed a super cushion shoe. I'd rather feel the earth, and it feels faster to have less shoe for me, but perhaps that'll evolve over time. Specifically for those nerds of you that are curious, I'll be starting in the Ultra Escalante 3s, I believe. You can feel free to Google. With a specific running concerns, interests, 2 runs a week. One will be a steady, still short-ish run, so 30 minutes of just let's start and find the most efficient running form possible that allows me to run as fast as possible whilst keeping the heart rate under 140 beats a minute. So the speed will be what it is. The thing that I'm concerned about at this stage is not running too fast. My instinct and my inclination will, as soon as I tie up my running shoes, is to kind of run as fast as I can for whatever the duration is. But that is not really going to help me down the line. I need to both build efficiency and form. So there's a real risk of overdoing it at this stage, which is why I need to be mindful of keeping a speed limit. There's a few ways to do it in terms of how to moderate one's effort in this instance, but for me, the simplest one is to have a hard heart rate limit, and things that will affect the heart rate are stuff like temperature and humidity, but it really is a sign of how hard I'm working. And if those things, temperature and humidity, are higher, then I would be on average working harder for the same speed. So if I have to slow down because it's hotter and more humid in order to be in the appropriate training zone, then that's simply how I'll adjust. This is all to say that the focus is not on how fast or even how far I'm running at this stage, but to accumulate minutes at the appropriate intensity. And because those minutes aren't especially high at the moment, I'm going to be continuing to use the bike erg to aggregate the majority of my aerobic volume. So my longer run at this stage is still a 30-minute run, but then I'll do 90 minutes of work on the bike erg. So it's 2 hours of aerobic volume, but only 30 minutes of that is running. Over time, the balance will shift where more of the volume is running specific, and then the bike erg is used to top up the aerobic volume or to be used as a warm down modality whilst contributing to the aerobic total. One other thing I'm adding in this week, but also this phase, is hills, which perhaps is a little counterintuitive, but I think that it will put me in good stead for further down the line, given that when you run up a hill, there's actually less impact on your structure, the structure of your body, because each foot stride is a little closer to you. So instead of putting your foot down here, it's just in front, and then you're pushing past the point. So more metabolically demanding, but less demand on your bones and connective tissue. So at this stage, I'll have the shoes on for 2 runs. One is a short and steady. The other one is going to be hills. Also very moderate at this stage. The last time, just for a trip down memory lane, that I did any sort of hill running was a few years ago now. It would be 2021, September. So basically 3 years ago, and I went to go do some hill sprints, which I've done basically my entire training life, so like 25 years of hill sprints. And on this day, although I hadn't been running at all, I felt like, given the other stuff that I'd been doing at the time, that this was more than reasonable, because it had never not been. So grass hill, barefoot, fully warmed up, did a couple of hill sprints, admittedly at a pretty aggressive effort. And then on the third hill sprint, felt like I'd been shot in the back of the calf and tore my left calf, purple bruising down to the ankle by the end of that day. And then it took me the better part of 2 years to rehab that to the point that running at all, even jogging, would feel half normal. And that's been a process. So I'm pretty mindful of that when it comes to the hill running. So I'm saying hill running instead of hill sprints, because even though it'll be a run up with likely a walk or jog back recovery, I won't be sprinting to begin with. I will just be moderately running up a hill to get used to running up a hill again, and to derive the benefits that one gets from running up hills, which is strength training for running in the most specific way possible. Given that I'll be in an aggressive calorie deficit, I'm trying to hold on as much as possible to the muscles, in particular that relate to these two goals. The muscles that don't, I may need to lose a little bit of that in addition to just the adipose tissue, the fat, which is the stuff that I'll be most likely trying to free up in order to drop body weight, but some of it will likely be muscle, but ideally not muscle that's contributing to these two goals. And so running up hills will mean that the muscles that I'm using for that will continue to be muscles that my body prioritizes as having a need to maintain in this phase. I've already mentioned that I'll be using the bike erg to keep going, to contribute, to utilize, to build my aerobic volume, because even though I can't do a lot of running at the moment, I still need to be adding aerobic minutes, because that will be a main driver of any success I have over here. So I both need to build an engine that is able to do this whilst building the running specific capacity to be able to do it, as well as manage the training between now and then. I've spoken to the body weight. I guess the main emphasis is to continue to have room to move when it comes to training. So although I'm super enthusiastic at the moment, I need to meet myself where I'm at, which is, again, not where I'll be. So for this phase 2 of a likely 10 phases, although I need to keep building on this, and I need to get a move on if I'm going to do this, I need to have some respect from where I'm at, and to not do more than I need to make improvements at the moment. So I'm not measuring myself to where I need to be. I'm referencing where I am at the moment, where I was in the prior training phase, and what I think is reasonable for right now. In terms of a microcycle for the week, as we wrap up here, Monday, the day is a power emphasis. Tuesday is when I will do the hills and some bike erg, so that's a aerobic running day, but slightly more intense than the other day, which I'll speak to. Then there's a recovery day with a mobility, soft tissue, yoga emphasis. That'll be a Wednesday. Thursday is the strength day. That's my deadlift focus day, but still includes stuff like some dips and pull-ups, which contribute specifically to the deadlift, but also are maintaining more broad athleticism before we get more and more specific down the line. Day 5, Friday, is my longer day, and that'll be the short long run into some long bike erg. Saturday is a bit like Wednesday in that it's recovery and yoga, mobility, soft tissue work. Try and take that very seriously because it contributes well to everything else. Sunday is another recovery day. It's also a work day for me. It's a lot about getting set up for the next week. It might mean more stretching. It might mean doing nothing. It might mean a yoga class. It's the day that is the most free form. So I think of it as having 6 training days, Monday through Saturday. Sunday is a bit, it depends. Depends on how the week before has gone, how my body's feeling, and basically it's about getting ready for the week ahead. That's probably enough detail for unpacking phase 1, speaking a little bit to phase 2, and broadly giving an update on how training's gone so far. If you have any questions, then plonk them in the comments, and if you find this interesting, if you want me to do more of this for further phases, then indicate that in the comments too. And wish me all the best as I keep getting stuck into this.